we're having a bit of a Julia Donaldson week this week because this is another one that she's written and it's called, the title is The Smartest Giant in Town. Now the blurb is on the back, look, and here's some of the characters I think we might see. George wished he wasn't the scruffiest giant in town. So one day when he sees a new shop selling giant-sized clothes, he decides it's time for a new look. With smart trousers, a smart shirt, stripy tie and shiny shoes, George is a new giant. But just on his way, he meets various animals who desperately need his help and his clothes. Ooh, wonder what the animals could do with a giant's clothes. Let's have a look. Well, he's definitely much bigger than everybody else, isn't he? Let's have a look. This must be George. George was a giant, the scruffiest giant in town. He always wore the same old pair of brown sandals and the same old patched up gown. I wish I wasn't the scruffiest giant in town, he said sadly. Doesn't look very happy, does he? But one day George noticed a new shop. It was full of smart clothes, so he bought a smart shirt, a smart pair of trousers, a smart belt, a smart stripy tie, some smart socks with diamonds up the side, and a pair of smart shiny shoes. Now I'm the smartest giant in town, he said proudly. So we've gone from sad to proud. Let's see what happens next. George left his old clothes behind in the shop. He was about to go home when he heard a sound. On the pavement stood a giraffe. Do you often meet giraffes in the street? No, me either. He was sniffing sadly. What's the matter? Asked George. Cheer up, said George, and he took off his stripy tie. It didn't match my socks anyway, he said, as he wound it round and round the giraffe's neck. It made a wonderful scarf. Thank you, said the giraffe. As George strode towards home, he sang to himself. My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a river. On a boat stood a goat. Oh, that's like our rhyme for oh, isn't it? Who was bleating loudly. What's the matter? Asked George. It's my sail, said the goat. It blew away in the storm. I wish I had a strong new sail for my boat. What do you think George is going to give him to help him? Cheer up, said George, and he took off his new white shirt. It kept coming untucked anyway, he said as he tied it to the mast of the goat's boat. It made a magnificent sail. Thank you, said the goat. George strode on, singing to himself. My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. But look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a tiny ruined house. Beside the house stood a white mouse with lots of baby mice. They were all squeaking. What's the matter? Asked George. It's our house, squeaked the mother mouse. It burned down and now we've got nowhere to live. I wish we had a nice new house. Oh dear. Cheer up, said George, and he took off one of his shiny shoes. It was giving me blisters anyway, he said. As one of the mouse and her babies scrambled inside, the shoe made a perfect home for them. Thank you, they squeaked. George had to hop along the road now, but he didn't mind. How many legs do you use if you're hopping? Just one, well done. He hopped along and he sang to himself. My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe. My shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. My shoe is a house for a little white mouse. But look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town. George came to a campsite. Beside a tent stood a fox who was crying. What's the matter? Asked George. It's my sleeping bag, said the fox. I dropped it in a puddle. I wish I had a warm, dry sleeping bag. Everyone needs somewhere dry and warm to sleep, don't they? Cheer up, said George, and he took off one of his socks with diamonds up the side. "It was tickling my toes anyway," he said as the fox snuggled into it. "It made a very fine sleeping bag." "Thank you," said the fox. George hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of my socks is a bed for a fox, but look me up and down, I'm the smartest giant in town." George came to a squelchy bog. Beside the bog stood a dog who was howling. "What's the matter?" asked George. "Well, it's this bog," said the dog. "I need to cross it, but I keep getting stuck in the mud. I wish there was a safe, dry path." "Cheer up," said George, and he took off his smart new belt. "Uh-oh, it was squashing my tummy anyway," he said as he laid it down over the bog. "It made an excellent path." "Thank you," said the dog. Very polite, aren't they, these animals? The wind started to blow, but George didn't mind. He hopped on, singing to himself, "My tie's a scarf for a cold giraffe, my shirt's on a boat to sail for a goat, my shoe is a house for a little white mouse, one of my socks is a bed for a fox, my belt helped a dog who was crossing a bog, but..." Uh-oh, what can you see now that you couldn't see before? "But my trousers are falling down. Ah! I'm the coldest giant in town." Suddenly, George felt sad and shivery and not at all smart. He stood on one foot and thought, "I'll have to go back to the shop and buy some more clothes." He decided. He turned round and hopped all the way back to the shop. Do you think the shop's going to be open? That's the question. But when he got there, it was shut. "Oh no!" cried George. He sank down onto the doorstep and a tear ran down. He felt as sad as all the animals he had met on his way home. Then out of the corner of his eye, he saw a bag with something familiar poking out of the top. What do you think that might be? George took a closer look. "My gown!" he yelled. "My dear old gown and sandals." George put them on. They felt wonderfully comfortable. "I'm the cosiest giant in town," he cried, and danced back home along the road. So he's gone from being sad to proud to smart to cold to sad to cosy. What was he in between when he was giving all his clothes away? Let's find out. Outside his front door stood all the animals he had helped. They were carrying an enormous present. "Come on, George," they said, "open it." George untied the ribbon. Inside was a beautiful gold paper crown and a card. "Look inside, George," said the animals. George put the crown on his head and opened the card. Got the beautiful handwriting. I think they've used their phonics to write this too. Inside it said, "Your tie is a scarf for a cold giraffe." Look, they've drawn a picture. "Your shirt's on a boat as a sail for a goat. Your shoe is a house for a little white mouse. One of your socks is a bed for a fox. You helped the dog who was crossing a bog. So here is a very fine crown to go with the sandals and gown of the kindest giant in town." It's good to be kind, isn't it? There they go. So he was lots of things, but the most important thing was he was kind. And his animal friends were very polite too. Hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you again for another one tomorrow. Goodbye.